welcome to another RSR. Today, we are doing our 2024 MLS season predictions, the table predictions for each conference, from 14-1 in the West and from 15-1 in the East, and then maybe I'll do a really early playoff prediction at the end of this. You're asking, Ryan, why didn't you pull out the whiteboard? I can just pull up the logo and show it to you and hold it as long as I'm talking about that team. Besides, let's remember that when we had the whiteboard, there was a little bit of a glare from the light anyway. So you know what? I don't think this will hurt either, Doing it this way, showing the logo and whatever. So with that being said, let's start with the West as I'm wearing the St. Louis kit. And we'll go with number 14. And the worst team in the West will be Minnesota United Football Club. They have the best jersey in the league, the two best jerseys, the best jersey combo in the league, but they are going to be horrible this year. They are going to be trashed this year. There's nothing to me that says Minnesota can save themselves from the hell they've put themselves in. Yes, they still have Teemu Pukki. Reynoso is not AWOL, I think. I think he showed up to preseason. I don't think he's AWOL this time, this long. But again, he went AWOL again for a while. They still have Long One. Their defense still questionable. They still got Arriaga. They got good players, but it doesn't matter what you have on paper. Just look at Toronto FC and Miami. Minnesota has a horrible interim coach. They've had two interim coaches since they fired Adrian Heath. They're about to hire a 30-some-year-old from Man United from Ten Hag's staff, which I don't think will be that great. They really could have tried to swing for the fences and get a better manager than that. But the players they have may make them better, but only like two places better. Minnesota's going to have a horrible season. I'm sorry, they're going to have a horrible season. So, 14th place in the West is Minnesota United. 13th place, Austin FC. I just don't see how they bounce back. I really don't. Josh Wolff is on the hot seat. A lot of the Western teams are just better than them on paper. They had a horrible season last year after making the Western Conference Final in 22. I don't see them bouncing back. I don't. I think they're just barely better than Minnesota, but at least they have a coach right now to start the season, a permanent coach. I think Wolff might be one of the first guys to get sacked. I'd put my money there. Austin, they're very questionable. I haven't seen any really big upgrades, and let's be honest, I haven't really seen anything that tells me they're going to bounce back. Number 12, the San Jose Earthquakes. You lost your best player, Cade Cowell, and he looks like a brand new man. He looks like the him you said he was going to be at Chivas. Yeah, I'm sorry. Last year was pretty good. You made the wild card. You had a really good start to the year, then you made the wild card and got beat by Kansas City. I think you're going to fall off out of the playoffs. You're one of those teams. I'm sorry. Nice away kit. Home kit's pretty nice too. That did grow on me, but sorry. This year, y'all going to fall off. Hate to tell you, but it's the truth. Number 14, 13, 12, 11, FC Dallas. FC Dallas is 11th in the West to me. Again, a lot of these teams are better on paper than Dallas. You lost Velasco for most of the year. Ferreira, he's mid. You still have a Laura Mendy. You got a good striker. You got a new striker, Peter Musa. But without Velasco, I don't know. Dallas, to me... Oh, by the way, they still have concrete feet, Omar Gonzalez, so that's great. I'm kidding. That's a bad idea. For me, Dallas... It's not that I'm hating on Dallas, but they're always around this portion. If they do better, great. If they do worse, I'm not surprised. Like, on paper, even if they look somewhat good, they're still like 11th or 10th or 9th. And 11 sounds right to me. They could do better. Yeah, I'll take an L if I'm wrong. This isn't like the last time I've disregarded them. I just don't think the other teams in the West are worse than them or very equal. We'll see how they play on the pitch, but 11th place goes to Dallas. The final team out of the playoffs. The 10th place team in the West, the final team out of the playoffs in the West. Real Salt Lake. They've been really coasting by, barely in the playoffs for the past couple of years. And they had a really good season last year, but I think there are going to be some teams that really bounce up that make RSL fall out. Some of the teams that I think are going to bounce up are more historical powers. And I think once balance is restored, RSL is a team who's going to really fall flat or be the victim of the balance being restored. I think they have some good players, but with some of these traditional powers getting reshuffled back into the playoffs, I think RSL is going to be the people who, they're barely going to miss the playoffs. Maybe by 3 points a point, but they're just going to barely miss because some of these traditional powers make the playoffs at the lower end. So, sorry RSL. It's not that I don't like you. I just think you're the ones who are going to fall because of some of these traditional powers. Speaking of, 9th place, the second wild card team, Colorado Rapids. They got Jordi Mihailovic. They got Zach Steffen. Chris Armas looks like, well, they actually look pretty decent under Chris Armas. Like, he learned his lesson from Red Bull and Tirana. It looks like Colorado's more of a team-based group. You know, I think Colorado's going to barely make the playoffs. I think they're going to be the second wild card and go be hosted by the next team I show in the wild card round. I don't know if they'll win that. We'll talk about that later in the video. I will do the playoffs thing. Don't worry. Speaking of, I should put the eliminated teams here. Colorado. They'll make the playoff, though. 9th place. 8th place in the West. Vancouver Whitecaps FC. They got some really good players. They brought in Damir Krylak. That's another thing that hurts RSL. They took Damir Krylak. They have still Ryan Gould, Brian White. They lost Junior Hoylett, but they still have Atakubi, and they lost Larea. But Vancouver still has a team on paper that should make the playoffs. And you know what? I'm going to go with it and say Vancouver Whitecaps finish 8th. They will host the wild card game. They will go to the playoffs and host the wild card game. They got the team to do it. They got the players to do it. Their coach, I'm not so sold on Vonnie Sartini, but they got the players to do it. They got the coach to do it. Vancouver might just be the best Canadian team in the league this year. I guess again, technically. But, yeah. There you go. I didn't say they'd win the Voyageurs Cup, but 8th place, Vancouver Whitecaps. At least I hope they don't. 7th place, the first team with a bye to the conference quarterfinals. LA Galaxy. You're going to say I'm crazy, but I think there have been some very good moves for the Galaxy in the offseason. I think this is the time Vanny has to answer. And they have a good new director of football operations who came over from LAFC. I think LA Galaxy, Greg Vanny, that group, I think they have to answer the bell. And I think they will answer the bell and make the playoffs. Let's not forget, in 2022, they made the playoff. Did not make the playoffs last year. Last year was an absolute horror show for them. This year, I think they'll bounce back and make the playoffs. 7th place. That's exactly what I see from this team. 7th place. They're going to get the bye into the conference quarters and face the second-ranked team. And there you go. I think LA Galaxy will do just enough to make the playoffs. Outside of the wild card, I should say. For a bye. 6th place. Sporting Kansas City. The players that they have, losing Denby hurts. Vermees right now has Sporting Kansas City playing well. They could fall off hard. They could. But they were hot last year after those first 10 games. I think they're going to be more like that than what they were to start last season. They got some good players. If Polito keeps going, if Johnny Russell keeps going, they got a good team. They do. And I don't see Kansas City going from not hot to back to not hot. You know what I'm saying? So you know what? Kansas City, 6th place. They'll face the 3rd seed in the playoff. Yeah. No wild card this time. They go straight into the playoff. 5th place. Houston Dynamo FC. Now you're saying Hector Herrera's out for a while. Bassi has a situation with immigration, getting his visa, his green card. Not his H-1B, his green card. Not his work visa, but his green card. He was trying to get his permanent residency. Carrasquilla may be gone in the summer. Nelson Quinones is out for the year. And you're saying 5th place? The way they played last year, Houston, under Ben Olsen, I think could be replicated with a couple of changes. He's got to do a couple of tweaks. But the way they played, if they keep playing that way, I still like their chances to finish 5th. I really do. I really do. And will they do anything in Champs Cup without Herrera and without Bassi and without Nelson Quinones? No, they won't. I think St. Louis will win that Champions Cup tie. I think Houston might have a horrible start to the year in comparison to their performances last year, but I think in the end it'll all even out. They'll finish 5th, and they'll make the playoffs. Or RSL could finish there, I don't know. We'll see. Number 4, the top 4, which Houston would face this team in the playoffs, St. Louis City SC, who they are already going to start the season together, and one of them might just end their season against each other. CONCACAF. But St. Louis, 4th place. I like their draft. I like the team that they have. I like the way that they're playing. St. Louis, to me, I don't see why they're not going to make the playoffs. Will they finish top of the West? No. That's not happening again. I can guarantee you that much. They're not going to finish top of the West. They will fall back. They will have a sophomore slump, so to speak. But I think they will be better in knockout tournaments than the league. I think they will still finish 4th, a respectable 4th place in the West. Pretty close to these next 3 teams. But I think they've strengthened. I think St. Louis have stayed similar, but I think they've done enough to be better in the moment when the big games come. So I think they'll be better in Champions Cup, better in Leagues Cup, better in the playoffs, but a little bit worse in the league, performance-wise. But I think they would want that with the way the season ended last year. I mean, if you look the way they lost to America in Leagues Cup, got grouped, they got knocked out straight away in the playoff as the number 1 seed. They didn't do well in Open Cup when they faced real competition. I think they're going to realize it's probably better to finish 4th and have a better chance in the playoffs, do better in Champions Cup. Let's also remember they're in Champions Cup, so that matters as well. And do better in Leagues Cup. Depends on what they decide for Open Cup, but it looks like the CONCACAF teams won't participate in Open Cup with the new version MLS wants. Or the new format they want. Just saw that, I hope. But St. Louis, 4th place. I like the way they play. I still have faith in them. 3rd place, Seattle Sounders FC with their horrible new crest. Seattle, I like De La Vega. I think that was a good move. They still have sort of navigated the waters of a reload to where they still look pretty strong. Seattle's 3rd place. I think it will be a pretty strong performance for them. I think they'll make a way into 3rd place in the West. I like the call. I really do. Seattle in 3rd. 2nd place, LAFC. They still have Denny Belonga. Good. They still have a pretty good defense. They've made some really good signings in the offseason. I think they have a point to prove. LA's going to be pissed off a lot this season. They're going to be hard to beat. They got a point to prove. They absolutely failed last year. In the end, they couldn't win the big trophies. They bottled a lot of big games. They're going to be angry. They've made some good signings. They still have Bouanga. Sharundalo, I'm not sure if he'll do his job. He may still suck. He may still be a fraud, but I think the team, they carried him before. They could do it again. LA in second. LAFC in second. In first place, Portland Timbers in the West. The Portland Timbers will finish first in the West. Why? I like their new defensive core. I like the wall of maple syrup. They got Crepeau. They got Kamal Miller. They still have Zach McGraw. The back line is great. They got some good offensive players. They're going to get that DP number 9. Portland are going to be a team to fear this year. Okay? Trust me when I say, you ain't want to play Portland. You don't want to play Portland. And if you do, well, you'll learn your lesson. So with that being said, that is your 14-1 in the Western Conference. In a little bit, let's focus on the Eastern Conference and talk about them 15-1. And then we'll do a early playoff prediction. Sound nice? Okay. Let's go. And we're back to the Eastern Conference. So we're into the Eastern Conference, 15-1. Let's do it. We'll start with number 15. Honestly, I think this might be, it's either Minnesota or them, but I think DC might, well, I gave it away. DC United, 15th place. I think they're probably going to win the wooden spoon. Troy Lezane, good coach. DC, still a crappy team. I mean, I think Troy Lezane was put in a position as to where he's got to fail before he succeeds. DC, I mean, they lost to the freaking fake Al Hilal of Sudan, isn't it? While they were playing in Qatar. Sudanese Premier League, I think. But still, not the real Al Hilal. They lost to a Sudanese Al Hilal. If I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's not conducive to good football and hopes to actually be good. So, sorry, DC. Dead last. 14th, Charlotte FC. Sold their best player. Dean Smith doesn't really inspire me as a coach. I mean, he wasn't really great with Villa, and he was worse with Norwich. He lost his best player. Charlotte is sort of, I don't know what they're trying to do, really. Are they rebuilding on the fly? Are they reloading? Are they trying to... I don't know what they're doing, you know? And I don't really like what they're trying to do. Like, they sort of wasted potential. And Dean Smith will probably be fired by Tepper very soon because, well, Tepper and the other people chose to sort of reload. Yeah, you're only going to last about 5 months. Hate to tell you, Dean. And that's just going to cause chaos. So 14th place. 13th place. CF Montreal. Laurent Courtois. Laurent Courtois is their new manager. Replacing Hernan Losada. Of course, Courtois has won a MLS Next Pro with Crew 2 and was the runner-up this past season. Could have won it, but Austin FC 2 won it in the pre-court bowl, so to speak. Did he show his face? I'm not sure. But Montreal, they've made a couple of good signings. Not Joseph, others. Joseph needs service. Montreal doesn't have that on the floor to him. So you know what? I'm not so worried about Joseph. Montreal, they're going to have to take a while to get used to Courtois' style. I think their signings will take a while to gel. And I think by then, they're going to be closer to 13th place. They're not going to be the worst, but they're not going to be very close to the playoffs either. I think this is a year where they figure things out and they're sort of punting it, but not really. If anything good happens, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. 13th place, Montreal. 12th place. 12th place. 12th place, Chicago Fire. I like what they're doing. I like their project. I think they have a good project. I think they're bringing in some really good players. I think they're bringing in some talented players. But I still think Chicago is going to finish lower than you would expect. Frank Klopas, even though he seems like he's the right guy for Chicago as a coach, he doesn't really give me hope or wow me as a coach. Even though he does seem like he is perfect for them, because whenever they fire somebody, he's the interim and they always bounce up in their performance. So maybe I'm wrong, but I think Chicago will finish 12th. 12th in the East. They'll have some good fights and they may barely miss the playoffs. I'm not saying it's going to be out there. It'll probably be barely. But again, another year that's basically a failure for the Chicago Fire. 11th place. New England Revolution. Yes, Caleb Porter's the manager. You know how this works, right? First year sucks. Second year cut. Third year falls apart. If he gets a fourth, it falls apart even more. That's how this works with Caleb Porter. This is the building year. This is the year where everything starts to make sense halfway through, but they're still beatable, right? They'll look better in the summer, which is why they're probably going to be closer to the playoffs than a Chicago or such. But New England still, I think, is pretty questionable to me. Yes, on paper, they've got good players. But there's been years where that doesn't matter in the recent times. And besides, I still think the clown show, I think he mentally has to work them through the clown show of last year as well. So, yeah, I'd say 11th place sounds about right for New England. Not bad, but not great. But they'll yo-yo once again. 10th place. Inter Miami CF. Now you're saying, Ryan, you're crazy. You know how I know I'm not crazy? You didn't watch the preseason. You did not watch their humiliation tour. Their world humiliation tour. They got flogged. 7 ways to Sunday. They couldn't beat Newell's, who the game before got curb stomped by Racing Club in Argentina. They only beat the Hong Kong 11. They couldn't even beat Dallas in the rematch of the century. They couldn't beat El Salvador. 0-0 draw. And they're in a lot of trouble. Good defensive play by El Salvador, but they're in trouble, El Salvador. And Miami couldn't beat El Salvador. They couldn't beat Dallas. Al Hilal and Al Nasser, I kind of get, but that Al Nasser game was still embarrassing. Al Hilal, probably their best performance, and they still lost. So, to me, Suarez is not going to be the guy they think he is. He probably may not start every game, or I should say, he's definitely not going to be the starter middle of the season. I think in the end, who's going to end up being the starter is Leo Campana, because I think he's the better striker. Messi, he's not going to be playing every game. That doesn't help either. That doesn't help you either. So in the end, it's like, okay, yeah, oh, by the way, Busquets is finished. Redondo might be good, but you lost Farias. Yeah, barely out of the playoffs. You missed by like 3 points. It may not be as embarrassing as Toronto last year, but with your expectations and having the greatest of all time on your squad, I don't know. I think 10th place is just as embarrassing as Toronto's wooden spoon last year. Speaking of Toronto, I know I gave that one away. 9th place. 9th place. Toronto will barely make the playoffs. They'll make the wild card. I thought their preseason looked great. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, you know what? They're going to make the playoffs. Barely make the wild card. They'll be going on the road for the wild card. I think they'll be hotter in the second half. But I think they will make the playoffs for the first time since 2020. I do. And you could say biased, but I like the way they're playing in preseason. They're finally getting their signings in. Herdman's got them playing well. I trust this team. I trust them. So, in the end, I think Toronto will make the playoffs in 9th place. Just barely. in, and it's going to punish Miami and punish some other teams. So, Toronto in the playoffs, ninth place. They'll be hot as the playoffs start, though, just so you know. 8th place, New York City FC. They've made some really good signings this offseason. Here's the problem, though. Their coach is still Cushing. So, yeah, that's the problem. That's the real problem. Your coach is still Cushing. If it was somebody worth a damn, I'd say you'd be higher. But hey, at least you made some good signings. 8th place in the wild card, New York City FC. So there you go. 7th place, just out of the wild card. The first team with a bye, Atlanta United FC. We don't know if Almada's going to stay all year. That's why you're this low. Tyler Wolff may take a step up. You better hope. You still have Yorgos Giacomakis. You still have Jean De Silva. But 7th place. Because, again, Almada is the question. And I don't know if he's going to be there halfway through the year. I don't. So, 7th. But they'll still make the playoffs. They'll still be good enough to make the playoffs. 6th place. New York Red Bull. They made a really good offseason run. Schwartz is their new coach. Emil Forsberg as their big signing. I'm sure Dante Van Zier will get back onto his form. Elias Manuel with that hat trick in the playoffs in the wild card round. New York Red Bull is going to finish 6th. They're going to make the playoffs again. They're going to finish 6th. I think they're in a very good position. Red Bull will be going to the playoff. And they'll look pretty damn good doing it. 5th place. 5th place. Nashville SC. They got Wubens Pashas. That's a good thing. Good backup striker. They still got Sam Surge. He was kicking on at the right time. Hani Mukhtar is still there. They still got Lucas McNaughton. They still got Walker Zimmerman. They're a very hard team to play. I will say that much. Nashville finished a respectable 5th place. You know how they do this at this point. They'll finish a respectable 5th place. As they normally would. Nashville. 5th place. 4th place in the East. Orlando City SC. They're still a good team. They still have Duncan McGuire. They got Luis Muriel, thanks to some transfer shenanigans. Or failure of a transfer for Duncan McGuire. 2 great strikers. They got Lodero in his final swan song as a free agent. I'm surprised he went to another MLS club. You know what? I think it might work with Orlando. Orlando's still got a really good club. They should finish 4th. They still should be very powerful. Orlando, 4th place. 3rd place, the Philadelphia Union. I don't see why they wouldn't be top 3. I do think they are the worst club of the top 3, at least on roster size or roster construction, but they're still top 3 by far in the East. So there you go. Philly, 3rd place. They'll find their way to the top 3. 2nd place, FC Cincinnati. They reinforced their defense to lose their striker, you know. They lost Brandon Vasquez. They still have Aaron Bupenza, but I'm sure he won't be as good. Luciano Costa is still there for the time being. They did reinforce their defense. They have Miazga and Robinson once that suspension is over for Miazga. I think that makes them fall a bit to 2nd place, but I don't see who else would be above them. So Cincinnati, 2nd place in the East. And finally, the 1st place in the East, and you know what? I'm going to call it. Supporter Shield winners, Columbus Crew, your defending MLS Cup champions with their damn Charlie Brown kit. I mean, they're the best team in the league right now. They are. Squad-wise, manager-wise, the way they play, they're the best team in the league right now. Who's going to topple them is the question. Maybe injuries. Maybe the CCL Champions Cup. Maybe. You know what, though? Don't see it. I don't see it. They're going to finish first to be the Supporter Shield winners. Columbus Crew. So now, let's predict the playoffs. We'll go back to the West. And then we'll have our MLS Cup finalist and early playoff predictions. So let's start with a wild card. Vancouver Whitecaps hosting the Colorado Rapids. For me, I got Vancouver winning it. I don't see Colorado going to Vancouver and winning over the Whitecaps. I just don't. So in a one-off wild card game in the West, hosting is Vancouver, they win. So 1 versus 8. The 3-game series is Portland Timbers versus Vancouver Whitecaps. Game 1 goes to Portland, and then when they go to Vancouver, Game 2 goes to Portland. They win this Cascadia matchup in the conference quarters. I don't see Vancouver lasting long. 2nd place and 7th place. Oh, I didn't realize that. Shit, there you go. LAFC hosted LA Galaxy in a playoff El Trafico for like the 3rd time. And I guess a 4th. LAFC wins at home. Galaxy finds a way to win at home. We have a game 3. LAFC wins at BMO Stadium to go to the next round of the playoffs and the conference semifinals. But we have a 3-game series out of it, which I guarantee you Don Garber would cream his pants for. 3 versus 6. Seattle Sounders versus Sporting Kansas City. I say Seattle wins 1. Sporting KC wins at home. Seattle finishes it off. In Seattle, they move on. All 3 top seeds have moved on. And then St. Louis versus Houston. I think we'll have more 3-game series this year. St. Louis wins game 1. They lose in Houston. St. Louis wins game 3. So St. Louis will move on to the conference semifinals, which means that'll be 1v4, 2v3. Portland versus St. Louis. Portland hosting St. Louis. Portland wins. Simple. Portland wins over St. Louis. I think Portland has the better defense and the better offense, I surely would think at the time. LA versus Seattle. At BMO Stadium, I got LA winning because I don't think Seattle will be able to manage on the road. And besides, I don't think Schmetzer feels better than Sharundalo. I don't know. Portland, LA. In the Western Conference Final, at Providence Park, I got the Portland Timbers winning. I got Portland Timbers going to MLS Cup out of the West. They'll finish top of the West, and they will make the final. Eastern Conference. Wild card round. Toronto being hosted by New York City FC. I think Toronto wins because you know what? I think they're going to bottle it. With Cushing, I think New York will bottle it. Toronto will go on to the conference quarters and be hosted by Columbus. Columbus wins round 1 or game 1. Toronto comes home. They win game 2. All for a game 3 that, you know what? Toronto wins on penalties in game 3. Columbus Crew gets eliminated early. Because of all the injuries, because of all the matches, all the miles, Toronto makes it as an 8th seed to the conference. Toronto, I told you Toronto be hot late on. That probably may be biased. Yeah, that one might be crazy, but you know what? Screw it. All right. Cincinnati versus Atlanta. Game 1, Cincinnati. Game 2, again, I don't think they'll have Almada at this point. Game 2 is Cincinnati. Cincinnati moves on. All right. 3 versus 6. Philadelphia Union versus New York Red Bulls. Philadelphia Union wins game 1. I think they also win game 2. And then we got Orlando hosting Nashville. Orlando hosting Nashville once again. I think Orlando wins game 1. I think Nashville does win game 2 at Geodis Park. And Orlando will win game 3. So, I don't think they reseed. So, it would be Orlando hosting Toronto. Yeah, because, yeah. Orlando hosting Toronto in a one-off game. Conference quarters. I don't want to do this, but if Toronto's hot, do I go Toronto or do I go Orlando at home? You know what? Orlando choked to a team they shouldn't have choked up last year. They'll do it again. Toronto gets another upset in a one-off game. Conference finals bound. And then Cincinnati hosting Philly. Cincinnati will do it again. They'll beat Philly again. Cincinnati goes on to the conference final. Toronto hosted by Cincinnati. Yeah, this is when it ends. Cincinnati wins. They go to the MLS Cup final. Toronto just barely loses. The hotness runs out, which means we got Portland hosting Cincinnati in the MLS Cup final. I got Portland winning. Better defense, better offense, better coach. Well, I don't know about better coach. Actually, scratch that. No. But I like what Phil Neville's trying to do. My MLS Cup champions this year will be the Portland Timbers, beating Cincinnati in the MLS Cup final. There you go. So there you go. Portland, top of the West. Not top of the league, but top of the West. And they also win MLS Cup. I think that's a good call. So there you go. Both conferences and an early playoff prediction. I guarantee you a lot of this will probably end up wrong by December. Hell, by decision day. If you want me to do the table. But there you go. With that being said, if you like this video, like and share, subscribe. You know what it is. Tell your friends. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell notification once subscribed. Send some chats on the live streams. Comment on this video. Put us to play with, share with friends and family. All that great stuff. I shall see you tomorrow for a live watch along and review of St. Louis City SC versus Houston Dynamo FC in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. St. Louis, let's see you do better than Forge in Champions Cup. But I'll see you tomorrow. I'm Ryan and I'm out. Peace. See you. Can't wait for MLS to start in 2 days. Let's go.